Hey, what's up, guys? I'm going to do a quick talk on a deck that I've been working on that's largely based on the new Warrior of Light. So the new Warrior of Light, I think, has a lot of people interested in trying to figure out really where its home is. I think that it has a lot of good words on it, and so because of that, everyone's trying to figure out, how do I get this thing to be played? So the gist of what this basically says is that if you can manage to cast the card, you're going to have a huge body on the board for free, effectively, and then it has a first strike, haste, and brave. Now, the nuance is that you can only cast it by paying with backup CPs. So it's going to require you to have a fire, wind, earth, and water backup, which is pretty obnoxious for the vast majority of decks. And I've seen a lot of people trying to utilize things like soirees to try to get this on board, but I think that you could actually use it in its actual intended purpose, which is in a Warrior of Light deck. So we're going to talk about how I figured the best way to approach this with, and it's going to largely be based with Warrior of Light and Refia kind of being your win conditions, in addition to Opus 18 Ferris. So quick overview as to what these cards actually do here. So Warrior of Light has first strike, haste, and brave, so he can come in and then just swing right away. When he enters the field, he reactivates all of your backups. Theoretically, if you pay something else, let's say you pay for like tap 1, pitch for Ferris, you search for Warrior of Light off of her damage 3 ability, then you could cast him and you get the extra backup that you paid with Ferris off of her as well. So you could technically get 5. And then you could ping him to deal 5k to anything. So then Refia, what she does is that you can duel 4 active Warrior of Lights. They don't have to be forwards. They can include backups. And then you can put something on the top or the bottom of the opponent's deck, which feels absolutely ridiculous when you have circumstances like you play Warrior of Light, then you use Refia, put something on the top of the deck, and then you swing with Warrior of Light, so you get rid of that from the game, assuming that it's just an annoying forward that you just can't deal with. Now, the question ultimately becomes, how do I get all this together working so that I'm not completely screwed by colors all the time? It's very difficult to feel comfortable running 15 like water, 15 earth, and then 10 fire and 10 wind or whatever to try and just get the means by which to play him. And I think that this all comes together through a variety of reasons and actually worked much better than I would have expected. So the other engines that I have here, and then Ferris, I'm sorry. Basically, what she does is that when she comes in, you deal 1,000 to the board, and then you can ping something for 3,000 for every time a Warrior of Light takes damage. So it would be 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, assuming that they all were on the board at the same time. Or she deals an additional 3 ping whenever a Warrior of Light enters the field. And then at damage 3, so you can search for any Warrior of Light besides herself. So now back to these guys. So this copy of Soul and Aegis, and then 3 copies of Cecil. So what this little engine does is these 2 cards are basically trying to get around the fact that you are going to oftentimes get screwed by colors. You are going to at best have maybe a fire card that you can pitch for Aegis or a wind card you can pitch for Cecil, and you want to be able to play your backup so you can ultimately start working towards this Warrior of Light at the end of the day. Soul is awesome because what he does is he comes in for 1 drop, and then he all have haste if you have any of your other forwards, basically, with the exception of 2 in the deck. And then if he party attacks, you can search for any Warrior of Light character. It costs 2 or more. Now, this very importantly does not say that it has to be a forward. It can be a backup, which we'll get into our Warrior of Light backup package. And then Aegis has the text that when he enters the field, you can play a Warrior of Light of cost 4 or less from your hand onto the field, completely ignoring colors. And then Cecil can play something for cost 4 or less from the field as well. He has that Final Fantasy IV like synergy, but there are no other Final Fantasy IV cards in the entire deck, so that's completely worthless. All he does is tax your opponent for abilities and play your backups, which is really his main role. So now our Warrior of Light backup engine. 3 copies of Krill. Krill is going to be able to search a Final Fantasy V forward from your break zone, or alternatively a summon. We run 8 summons, and we run we run 8 Final Fantasy V forwards, so she's going to almost always be active. And it's very, very satisfying to play Aegis, play Krill off of Aegis for free, and then get like a Ferris or something from your break zone. 2 copies of Arc, and 2 copies of Luneth. So when I read these guys, I kind of thought that they were going to be completely trash and just means by which to be a Warrior of Light backup, that is all I care about. It does not matter anything else. They actually turned out to be much better than I would have expected. So not only do they reactivate off of Refia in the combat phase, so you could main one, use them as backup enter CP, and then get the ability to use them again during your main two, or you could use them to tap for her ability. Arc has a pretty good ability where he's able to tap for one. You could pay one win and tap him, and you make any of your Warrior of Lights untargetable by abilities for the rest of the turn. And then Lunith has the ability of pitching one of any color and then tapping himself to give something haste. So you could theoretically play Ferris, tap something, tap Lunith, give Ferris haste. She gets her entry effect and swing effect on the same turn, which could completely board wipe your opponent pretty easily. Though it would ironically kill Soul because he's only 2k. Now, as far as our remaining Warrior of Light package, I have 3 copies of this Bartz and 2 copies of this Lena. I think we're getting into the part of the Warrior of Light package that I think is fairly cuttable, to be quite honest. This Bartz, what he does is he has the potential to have a huge payoff if you get really, really lucky, if the stars align. If you have him on the field, every time a Warrior of Light enters the field, you get a crystal. If you pay 3 crystals, then you can resurrect a Warrior of Light when it dies. So if Ferris dies, you resurrect her, you ping your whole board again, you search for another Warrior of Light, or there's another Warrior of Light that we'll get into shortly, but if Lena dies, you pay for Lena, you bring Lena back, then you stack so that you get the crystal first, then you pay the 1 crystal to get Soul back, and then you'll still end up with 1 crystal at the end of it. So it has the capacity to build pretty quickly. That being said, I think it's one of the slowest win conditions of the entire deck. So I think it could be cut. I've trialed having the 2-drop Opus 18 Bartz in there just as additional Final Fantasy V characters that could be resurrected off of Crow, with potential implications with Refia and Ferris. And he also becomes humongous very, very quickly. But I think that this engine is, while not consistent necessarily, if it goes off, it can be humongous. And I think it might be worthwhile just keeping. Then I have 2 copies of this Onion Knight, which for all intents and purposes to me reads, if you have 3 cards in hand, you play him and you draw 2 cards. So he's just effectively a free forward in that very specific scenario. So you can ping Ferris, get Refia triggers, and just work towards making your opponent have a horrible day. And then I have 1 copy of this Onion Knight. This Onion Knight, I think, actually could be very reasonably made into all 3 of the Onion Knight package. What it does is you can return Onion Knight to hand and play 1 forward of cost 3 or 4 from your hand onto the field. Very importantly, it does not say anywhere on that card that it has to be during your turn. So if he survives the turn, unfortunately it does require that you duel him, but you could also Lunith him to have haste. If he survives the turn, pitch him back to hand, play Warrior of Light for free off of it, or you can play Ferris free off of it, ping your whole board, get a search off. Nowhere on Warrior of Light does it say he can't be cheated in. So you can cheat him in with Onion Knight, you can cheat him in with Aegis, you can cheat him in with Cecil. And then as far as the last 3 remaining forwards in the deck, I have 1 copy of this Wool. I think that a light card needs to be spectacular to find a home in most decks nowadays. This Wool has the very important caveat that he can search, or he has the ability to look at your top 5 cards and add any Warrior of Light. Once again, very importantly, it does include backups, so you can get Krill, Arc, or Lunith. Or if you're later on in game, you can get Ferris or Refia. And then when he dies, most importantly, you can then play a cost 3 forward Warrior of Light from your field into from your break zone into the field. So you could get Lena, and then off of Lena theoretically you get Ferris if you have enough crystals, or Refia, and then or you could get Ferris onto the field, ping the board, and then possibly board with your opponent and search for Refia or Wool. So I think he actually has a really good home in this deck and is worth playing at a 1 of. I think anything more, and it's just going to feel like you're always drawing both of them in hand. That's always just how I felt every time I've played multiple light cards in a deck. But regardless, I think he's got a really good home here. And then I have 2 copies of the new Zidane, because basically my philosophy, I think, going forth in this game is going to be anytime you have the capacity to play a wind and a fire card in the same deck, you should be playing Zidane. He is extremely annoying, can get that last little push for lethal while simultaneously just making your opponent furious about losing their best card in their hand, or they're going to have to use the Amaterasu that you alternatively would have stolen off of him, which at that point it still feels worth it because they're using basically 5 CP's worth of energy to get rid of a 2 CP card. Now we're going to go into the rest of the backup line, and then I'll talk about how the whole thing works together pretty quickly. And I'm pretty sure everyone knows that the key to most of these decks is Sildra, but we'll get into why Sildra's so good. So the rest of our backup line, 2 copies of King Tycoon. He's an EX burst that off of his burst you can search for either Ferris or Lena. 99% of the time, you're going to want to be searching off of Ferris, but sometimes you'll be wanting to search for Lena for that last little bit of CP energy. I have 3 copies of Sarah. Sarah is going to be able to search for Princess Sarah or herself or Lena. The most important thing here is that you are going to be getting another element in play, basically. And then the last of our backup line is 2 copies of Tyro. And now to the elephant in the room is Sildra. So the reason why this deck actually works as well as it does in my mind is because if you basically get Krill or Tyro on available to you and you have them on the field, you can effectively get all of your other colors with just Sildra. So let's say you have Krill in hand. You can play her off of Aegis or something. You can cast Sildra, you can search for King Tycoon and Sarah. Then Sarah searches for Princess Sarah, which you'll claim as fire, and then you have all of your elements with just these 2 cards. Sildra can also search, so Sildra's targets Krill, Sarah, King Tycoon in your backup line. Unfortunately, you can't search for both Krill and Sarah. Theoretically, you could play a 1 copy of Oracle if you wanted to make it so that instead of 1 copy of Sarah, so that way you have 1 more Sildra target. But I think that playing 3 of Sarah usually has felt pretty good. And then if that's the case, if you were to do a 1 of Oracle, then you can basically get all of your energy off of Sildra just every single time. You get King Tycoon or Krill or Oracle / Princess Sarah or Sarah, which would get you Princess Sarah. So Sildra just makes the whole package work really, really, really well. And honestly, it does not often, I've extremely rarely felt like I'm completely screwed by colors in this deck. That being said, I think I planned it decently well so that Earth is effectively just there to be cheated in with Krill, or theoretically, once you have Krill in play, to get Tyro on board. And then everything else is mostly wind and fire. It's got a slight slash of water for Refia, Lena, and the Sarahs, and for Sildra, which I feel is just enough to get them played consistently, especially with Warrior of Light kind of color fixing everything. But regardless, I honestly think that it plays pretty consistent. Then, just like how I think Zidane will always be a staple of pretty much every deck with wind and fire going forth, I think that Amaterasu is a staple of pretty much every single deck of fire going forth. And then 2 copies of Kusith as one last little bit of recursion. It's really frustrating to have Kusith back Warrior of Light on your opponent's turn with 2 CP, then play him again for effectively free, and then you just swing for game with him, or you get your Refia, Ferris, or whatever. This is my take on Warrior of Lights for Opus 19 so far. Most cuttable cards, I think. This package right here, I definitely think that these 2 Onionites could easily become this Onionite as well, though he does feel kind of slow, made slightly better by this Lunith backup. Zidane, I think, is extremely good. He might as well be there, but he doesn't really serve much the overall win condition of the deck. I think that this Bartz and Lena package is probably the best thing to do because it's good to have another backup or another card to search off of King Tycoon for colors. And to be quite frank, this is the best Lena we got. You have the 5-drop Lena in the past that can search a Resurrect a Water forward, but does literally nothing in this deck. And then the other Lena is the light Lena, which does nothing. And you're never going to get to 12 water cards in the break zone with the way that this deck is. I don't even think there are 12 water cards in the entire deck to resurrect something. So if you guys have any comments or any recommendations, please let me know. I'm happy to always see what you guys are saying. I'll put a deck list in the base, and then I'll be updating it based on what you guys have recommended and what I've play tested. And I'll see you around.